You're now listening to the Peach Pundit Podcast, where we are expressing our own personal opinions. These views may not reflect the opinions of those whom we may be professionally affiliated.
All right, we are back with another Peach Pundit Podcast. I'm Jason Pye, joined as always by Buzz Brockway and Scott Turner. Guys, It's good to see you.
Good to see you.
Welcome back.
And you might notice that we have a special guest. This is Georgia Secretary of State, Brad Raffensperger. Brad, good to have you on.
Good evening.
Thanks for joining us today. And we've been having candidates come on and talk about their races, mostly before the primary, but this one's a little bit different. You just won renomination for the Republican Party for Secretary of State, surprising many of people across the country. I mean, surprised me. As I was telling you before we came on, I was on a Zoom yesterday, and someone asked, like, what was the most surprising win or surprising race that you've seen, and I said Georgia, Brad Raffensperger, winning outright the nomination for Secretary of State. Who saw that coming? And but Secretary Raffensperger, we usually start off with like, what are you campaigning on? What's your race about? But for you, I think what has the last year and a half been like of your life, and how did you, I mean, as quickly and as concisely as possible, because we only have so much time, how did you go from where you were in November, December of 2020 to winning renomination last month?
That's a big story, I gather. But first of all, coming into the November election, I think 99% of all Republicans in Georgia expected Republicans to win up and down the line. And then when President came up short, that's when the wheels came off the car. And so that's when really the misinformation, disinformation, all that came out. And so what we did is we got facts, we got our data, and then I just began going out talking to people. And the first place I went to was the Bartow County Republican Party, probably April 2021. Well, I wrote, on January 6th, I did write a 10-page letter to Congress. They have it. No one's ever written back to me and refuted any of the points. So they have the data, but then I really just wanted to go out and talk to people. So I just started talking to people because I understood that there was an awful lot of stuff that was said, but here's what the facts are. And so we just continue to do that. So wherever you would invite me, I'd come. Some places Republicans just didn't want to hear from me, and that's, that was their right not to invite me. But I went to the Ben Hill Republican Party down in Fitzgerald. I went to Columbia County, Richmond County. I've been to a fair bit of LJ and also Dalton. Did a town hall up in Dalton. And just to take questions from voters. Give me 10 to 12 minutes. Let me tell you a broad overview of what happened in the election of 2020. Also to clear up all the stuff that was said about the Election Integrity Act, because we did lose an all-star game about that. And so it's very important people understand that was good election law. We have now more early voting. Look what we just had with our primary. And then just go out and meet and talk to people and then let them take questions. Because even if I just talk for 10 or 15 minutes, you still have questions. And so that way I could see what is the topic of the day, and then I could answer it. And that's what we did. We just dealt with facts. Many people didn't like the answers, and I understand that. But we wanted to make sure that we were always fact-based. And so we just continue to do that. I guess when I say we was me doing that because I was the person that was the Secretary of State. They didn't want to hear from anyone else but me. And so I put a lot of miles in the truck. But at the end of the day, I actually got over 50% in Cherokee County, which I think for me that is tremendous affirmation that there's lots of people out there. And I also, it sounds hokey, and I know, but please excuse this, but I leaned into the goodness of my average Georgian, because I think if I could talk to enough people, there's more Scott Turners and Buzz Brockways out there than people that you can't, talk to. I've served with both these gentlemen, and we didn't agree on all the bills, and yet we would have conversations, respectful ones, and that's what I wanted to do. Talk to my fellow Georgians, and like Luke Bryan says, most people are good, and most Georgians are wonderful. And the ones I didn't get their vote, I'm going to continue to go out there and talk to them and answer their questions so that we can just continue to expand our party and, really win big in the fall.
Scott, Buzz.
So you said something that is I've been kind of peeling back the layers of this onion, and as a result, I'm getting pinged from all across the state. I wrote a piece called "The Disconnect Between the Republican Party Activists and the Party Voters," and as a result, I've had a dozen calls from sitting legislators, and I've been like their therapist. They just vented on me about that experience that they're having, where what they're doing in the legislature matches up with their values, but these activists they're mean spirited and they're attacking, and they don't want to hear anything other than what they want to hear. I've heard that story over and over again. You said just a moment ago that there were a lot of Republicans who didn't want to hear from you. How do you feel about that disconnect? Is that a real thing for you? Did you notice between what the party activists are saying and advocating for, and obviously what you were able to pull off in the election by appealing to the Republican electorate?
Well, I wanted to talk to anyone. I went up to LJ, and Jack has a Tea Party group. There are 80 people there, but what he did is he maintained discipline so we could take questions. And one lady wanted a receipt. And I tried to explain to her, even though we have a verifiable paper ballot, no one was ever going to give you a receipt. And I tried to explain why that was. She didn't like the answer, but there's valid reasons. You want to stop voter coercion and vote buying, things like that. But it's just really talking to people, and I think to always talk in our respectful and calm voices. If I elevate my voice, they elevate their voice, and then we have a shouting match. So a gentle answer turns away wrath. And I just think that works. And I'm just going to continue to believe until proven otherwise that most Georgians are wonderful people, because I think the facts show that most Georgians are wonderful people. There's goodness in this state. There's goodness in this country, and we should never lose sight of that. And sometimes you watch the evening news and you see all this anger, vitriol. I think people want us to get back to something that works for them. Because, Scott, we have 8.5% inflation. Gas is almost $4.50 a gallon now. We have open borders, embarrassing withdrawal in Afghanistan. People have a lot of pain points in their lives. They want the government to start working for them. They're not saying, I don't believe that they're saying they want big government. They want effective government. And you two were probably some of the strongest proponents of effective, limited government that works for the people. And I think there's a place for that.
So, Brad, accusations of stolen elections is not new in Georgia, unfortunately. We go back to 2016. Hillary Clinton and her folks were claiming the Russians stole it. Of course, the whole world knows about Stacey Abrams' allegations in 2018. And then, of course, so what happened in 2020. But it seems to be coming from elements of the right and the left. Are you concerned, like I am, that there's growing numbers of people who just don't want to trust the results of an election, no matter who wins? If their person loses, they think the other side got there by some sort of malfeasance or whatever. What's your thoughts on what we can do about that, if you think it's a problem?
Well, I don't believe that the stolen election claims from Stacey Abrams or from our side have any place in Georgia or any place in our nation's discussion. At the end of the day, America is actually pretty darn good at running elections. We have a very complicated ballot. You go to all these other Western democracies, you show up, you vote, you have a choice of 6 people running for one spot. But you show up in the fall here, you're going to have all these races from U.S. Senator down to governor, all your constitutional officers, state house, state rep. You're going to have water and sewer board, county librarian, all these elected positions. It's a complicated ballot. And we actually do a remarkable good job. We have 159 counties. Most counties do a great job. And then you have a few counties that struggle. And it's a little bit almost like whack-a-mole that it sometimes move around to a different county. And I know that Scott Turner wants to talk about one of the counties in particular based on the primary, but we'll get to that. But the point is that by and large, everyone's really working hard to give you fair and honest elections. And we have data. I think that's real important. And we have a paper ballot. So we can do risk-limiting audits, which is another Scott Turner favorite. Shout out. Well, House Bill 316 to give former Representative Scott Turner, the Honorable Scott Turner, the shout out. That was his. This has to be in this bill. We just can't be. We'd like to work on this. This has to be in. Scott.
Yeah, I spent a lot of capital making sure that we had risk-limiting audits.
To his point, Thank goodness we
Yeah.
did, because we then could say we are going to audit this race, the presidential race, and the counties couldn't say, no, we're not going to. We're going to do this race. And then we upped it. Instead of a 90% risk limit, we said, let's make it 100%, which was a 100% retally. But that gave people the answers. Many didn't like the answer, but it really helped us. And what we just had come through the General Assembly this past session, we were pushing for additional audits. And we hope that the General Assembly will take that up. I'll say many of the county election directors would actually like to do more audits. And I think that would be very helpful if we had some requirements on that.
If I could,
so I don't have much.
Jason, if I could just ask a quick follow-up.
Go ahead.
Brad, I know, when you and I were running for Secretary of State, we encountered, I know I did, I'm sure you did too, lots of people in local county elections offices. I mean, these, to your point, these folks are good folks that most of them don't make a career of this. They're setting aside a day or a couple weeks out of a year to try to make our elections work well, and they work really hard and they take it very seriously. No matter where they come from on the political spectrum, they're coming at it because they care and they want to see everybody's vote counted and the will of the people expressed through the election. So I know you now are the supervisor of all of those folks, and I'm always amazed. Like you said, I think it's an amazing thing that we pull off this massive election and have any clue who wins. So kudos to all those folks.
Well, and I would also give it to their organization, Gavrio, the Voter Registrars and Election Officials Association. They're really elevating the professionalism and they're broadening it throughout the organization. So additional training, and then also really getting involved in the legislative process in an organized way. So when they like something, they say, this is really good, this will be good for us, or this is going to cause this heartache here for your county election offices or your poll workers. Yeah. But I'm really seeing an elevation. They're actually, many of them would like to see more risk limiting audit. Lynn Bailey, I like to say she's a rock star, but when she retired after 25 years running the Richmond County, we hired her as our liaison to work with the counties so that we can make sure that we're really working with them. In fact, when we are looking at administrative code, we have what we call our working county rules working group, and we have a group of county election officials we work with. So before we do this, we want to make sure it works for them from the administrative aspect, and we don't miss something through a blind spot, so that when we present things, it has buy-in from everyone up and down the line. So we're working together to make sure we have accessible, secure elections. And there's a tension there. We want them to be accessible, but we have to have rules. Like we need photo ID, and having photo ID for all forms of voting. That's just, I think, tremendous. It increases security, elevates confidence.
Yeah. So I don't have much in the way of actual policy questions, Secretary Raffensperger, because I don't. Both of these gentlemen have studied the issue very extensively. I have not touched election issues since I left FreedomWorks. So that was probably January 2021. I guess my question is more like, 30,000 foot view, more just kind of seeing what was going through your head during the course of the past couple of years, because I got to ask, and I know you said you went out and you met people where they were, you went out and talked to them, you went to these county Republican Party meetings or whatever and met with people. But when this was all going on, did you ever just step back and say, this is not my Republican Party, I'm done here? The party's been taken over by crackpots, whatever the case may be. Did you ever just step back and say, I'm done, I can't do this anymore?
No, because I think I'm a Reagan Republican. But if you look at Ronald Reagan, he had a big coalition, big tent. And we need to update that for the 2025, 2030, for the younger generation, because you have to understand Ronald Reagan served from 80 to 88, and most people listening to this weren't even born then. So we have to understand that. But Ronald Reagan reached to the libertarians, Western conservatives. They're very libertarian, freedom. We don't want barbed wire. We don't want the federal government telling us what to do. So deregulation, things like that. But I think there's a lot of people that we have a big, broad coalition. And I think you have three people on this that, there might be people that you could say Rand Paul Republicans or Ben Sass Republicans. And then there's, people that'll be George W. Bush. There's all different, but there's a big place for us. And we need to make sure we can get along in our family. But then we have to have an attractive message that grows the party. Otherwise, it just shrinks and shrinks and shrinks. And that's what I was out there doing, is trying to really expand the party, being positive, aspirational, looking forward. Because the number one issue that no one's talking about, here's what it is. It's stopping non-citizen voting. Right now, today, Fair Fight Action has us in federal court. And one of the things they want to stop us from doing in Georgia is checking citizenship when you go to register. Yeah, think about that. What happens if we lost that case? Then all of a sudden, then they're going to go ahead and use that stare decisis, that precedent, and they're going to try another state that's competitive, like North Carolina, and then pick off those states. And eventually they'll do that nationwide. And you have non-citizens on the voter rolls, you end up with non-citizen voting. That is actually forward-looking, because what already you've seen, when we ran 4 years ago, Buzz and I, they only had a few places where they were letting non-citizens vote in municipal elections. Now you have the city of New York, 3 cities in Vermont, and you're looking at Maine, Maryland, and then California's expanding that. And 80% of all Georgians, that means it's bipartisan, because we don't have 80% Republicans, right? So 70% of all Democrats, 78% of all African Americans, 93% of all Republicans believe only Americans should vote. So there's something so if we talk about the Eisenhower principle, which find where 60 to 80% of people agree on something, there's something they agree on. So let's make sure only Americans vote, put it in the state constitution, and work with the feds. If they want to do some federal oversight, make sure that only Americans are voting nationwide, up and down the line. If you have to be an American to be on the jury, doesn't it make sense you'd have to be an American to be voting in elections?
Buzz, I'm going to let you go before Scott, because Scott has got something that I think is probably going to...
I've got something else before I get there, though.
I'm still going to go to Buzz first, because he's cooler than you.
That's true.
Brad, all right. So, looking forward a little bit, you've made it through the Republican primary. You don't yet know who your Democratic opponent is going to be. They're in a runoff. We'll find out, in a couple of weeks here. But what kind of message now, as you shift toward a general election, do you foresee any changes in how you message? Or it seems to me that the way you ran in the Republican primary is how you're going to run in the general election. But what's going to be your approach as you try to convince the voters to all the voters of Georgia to send you back to that office one more time?
I think I just gave you my message, and then town halls, visiting, the state, from 400 miles, all 4 corners of the state. It's a big state, but I'll go talk to anyone. But doing town halls, Rotary, Kiwanis, Republican. I don't think the Democrats will be inviting me in, but that's okay. There may be a few that show up with these town halls or a business chamber meeting, but wherever I have opportunities with just to talk to Georgians, because I believe fervently that right now, more than ever, people are looking for effective government. They're looking for people they're elected public servants that'll really, truly care for them and do what they say they're going to do. I also want to see what we can do. We talk about the Arizona model for professional licensing. We don't really talk about that. And after COVID, our focus, new voting machines, that was my first term. But we really need to look at about licensing reform. And I think that would really be be important. And hopefully, Jason, that's kind of in your wheelhouse, I think.
It is. It is. No, I was going to say, not only does that make me very happy to hear that, but I know Shoshana Weissman with the R Street Institute, who just fangirls out over the issue of occupational licensing, will be very happy to hear that. So I'm going to send that clip to her as soon as this is online and say, Secretary Raffensperger down in Georgia is singing your tune. But no, that is something. I mean, most of what I work on is sentencing reform, corrections reform, things like that, second chance legislation. But having an Arizona model is essentially where all state licenses are honored from out of state. That's exactly where we should be going.
So, Brad, we've got a little informal working group, me and some folks at some other organizations, including R Street, to try to tackle that issue. So, yeah, we'd love to work with you on that to make it better for Georgians.
Well,
And as a legislator who actually introduced the Arizona model as legislation in his last 2 years in office, I think what you did is you went and looked at all my legislation before you came on here and said, how can I get Scott to like me? That's what I think happened just now. I'm going to call you out on that.
No, I've always supported what I've said, and I believe this. Structural engineers like me, that's public safety. And then nurses, that is public health. I understand the purpose of that for licensing, but we've licensed too much. We had that bill about lactation consultants that I voted against, and I believe these two gentlemen probably voted against it also.
Yep,
and
I did too. Yeah,
Sharon Cooper never forgave me.
And that is now being appealed, but they haven't asked me to testify because they know what my position is because I voted against it. But it did pass and signed into law. But that's the kind of things we just need to make sure we're placing burdens on people that don't make their income is at a certain level. And when you start placing these burdens, and the other thing we should talk about is continuing education, because when you start saying, well, you need so many hours, well, there's a cost there and a time cost also. And so we need to really be mindful of that. And I hope that your organizations are looking at that. But I could speak as registered in about 30 states right now as a structural engineer, 7 as a GC. I can talk about continuing education hours.
Yeah. Good.
So since Buzz sort of took a little bit of the thunder about moving forward, looking at how you're going to combat D or B, most likely B, but could be D, when whoever is nominated on the Democrat side, I want to make a comment, then I'm going to switch gears into a different topic. The comment being that I think the Democrats are severely limited now that you're the nominee, because their story has been Republicans want to steal elections for the last several years. Since Stacey Abrams lost to Brian Kemp, that's been their story. And B. Wynn has been leading the bandwagon and the parade about that for the last 4 years. And now here you are, the guy who stood up against Trump, the guy who said we're going to follow the law, and they have nothing to attack you on. And where they disagree with you, you have the public on your side. So, work hard. Otherwise, there's no way you're losing. If you work hard, you're going to win. They have nothing to attack you on now. But switching topics, if I could, to DeKalb County. Because DeKalb County continues to make national headlines and embarrasses the heck out of me. I'm going to speak for myself as a Georgian who is concerned about voter confidence and pays very close attention to election law and campaigns. And so DeKalb County, for those who don't know or who are listening to this, I don't know anybody who would be listening to this that doesn't know it's been happening in DeKalb. But for those who don't know, DeKalb County had a District 2 county commission race. It originally had 4 candidates. They had redistricting they had to deal with, and they really messed up because one of the guys decides to drop out after he qualified, a last name Broussard, and which he only got 135 votes anyway, so it really shouldn't have been a huge factor. But they are not able to get the machines to report the count accurately. Michelle Longspears, and I'm going to say her name Longspears because if you put long in front of Spears, I'm going to pronounce it Longspears. Sorry. Michelle Longspears realizes, hey, the precinct where I voted for myself, I got 0 votes. That's not possible. And so they go and do this hand count, and the election supervisor in DeKalb County isn't able to give us a confident vote even after they completed the hand count. She said, I'm not releasing these results because I'm not confident yet. And a couple of days later, she actually does. And the results were startlingly different. Mm-hmm. Originally, Lauren Alexander and Marshall Orson were going to be heading into a runoff. They had gotten roughly 75% of the vote between the two of them. And Michelle Longspears had 23.98%. And then after the hand count, Michelle Longspears comes in with 43% on the nose. What happened?
Well, I think you hit there's probably several issues. One is you have a new election director, and this was her first, big election. It was a big election from the standpoint of turnout. Then the redistricting, they thought they had the right lines. And then what happened is in the last couple of days in the General Assembly, the lines got moved and it got missed. And so then they had that issue right there. Then you compounded it again. This person decided that they were dropping out. And hindsight's 20/20. But if they would have just kept that person on the ballot and then put up signs, please don't vote for this person withdrew. But what they did is then when the person withdrew, they adjusted the machines, the software for the candidates, and they moved them up. But then they didn't change, the scanners in all the precincts. So the scanners were reading the wrong one. Oh. So the only way to do that is a hand recount. And then when you had the hand recount, there was a lack of confidence in the people that were actually reporting the information, which is never a good thing. And so you had this, I think that's 4 or 5 different compounding errors throughout that process. So that's really where it is. So that's where you are now going forward. They do have a new number two coming in and joining their office. That person has about 20 years of experience coming out of Wisconsin. And I actually met her on Monday this week. So it was just happenstance. We were at the same conference and she told me who she was. And so that's having experience is a good thing. And that's something that they'll be looking at.
So on election night, Marshall Orson, who finished second, actually he finished first. He finished first with 5,226 votes. And after the hand count, he lost 1,194 votes.
Well,
How
I knew
does
that
that
the
happen?
2 and 3, it was through the scanners because the scanners weren't programmed with the right races. And the right when the one came out, and then they also had the wrong district line. So it was really, it was just you say, a combinative errors. We're going to write a report once we ascertain everything, just to really provide that as a public record. But the General Assembly, I'm sure, will be asking questions. But just so we can, doing as they say in Good to Great, an autopsy of that situation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, this is if I was in the legislature and I was a member of the House Governmental Affairs Committee, this is the one thing I'd be looking at right here. Because how do you go from 5,200 votes counted for you on election night and you drop down to 4,032? That would indicate to me, just by looking at the top line numbers, and I haven't done a deep dive, so I could be, and I'm not a conspiracy theorist when it comes to elections, but it indicates to me that there's a potential that these machines can be programmed, even in error, in such a way that they would flip a vote. Because votes that Mr. Orson was not entitled to were counting for him on election night.
And actually, to your point, that's what it was, because I know that when the number 2 person dropped out, that was there on the ballot, I believe it was Broussard. When that person dropped out, then the other 2 were moving up. And that, I know, messed up the key in, several. That's why it went all cattywampus.
Yeah.
The word cattywampus is underused in politics. Thank you, Secretary Raffensperger, for using it. Let me ask you,
I've heard that a lot in my life.
We're trying to keep this PG. I don't know what. So let me. I kind of have a sense of how you're going to answer this question, and I also want to be respectful of your time, and because I know you've been on with us for almost 30 minutes, and I know you probably have better things to do than talk to us three clowns. But
I worked with these 2 fellas for years, and I always enjoyed them. And
I'm so sorry for that. I've known these 2 clowns for almost 20 years apiece. So where do you go? Where do you go from here? Obviously, you got to wait for the Democratic nominee to the Democrats to figure out who their nominee is. But where do you go from here? You have from now until November to not just.
Well,
go
let's
ahead,
keep
Brian.
it real here. My governor, your governor, he got 74%. I didn't get 74%. And so what I really want to do is reach, broad and deep into the Republican Party and mend fences anywhere and do more listening tours, explaining tours, like here's where we are, and then tell them where we are right now so they understand we have safe and secure elections. Most people don't realize that what happened in 2020 is that 28,000 Georgians skipped the presidential race and yet voted down ballot. The Republican congressmen, they got 33,000 more votes than President Trump. And if the state reps, I know that if you look at Clay Perkle down in Turner County, he got 70% of the vote in his district, and President Trump got 63. That's facts, but it also gives you a picture of what happened in Georgia. And so we want to make sure that we have really strong turnout in our party, that we're unified. I think that's really important. And I think facts really help that. And I think talking and meeting and explaining with folks.
So when Donald Trump says, find me the votes, you can point to Turner County and say part of them there where you lost them, right?
So we checked all the data points because they had data people that were going to look at it. It was scrutinized. But when you do 100% hand recount, many of the counties had no change between the hand recount and the first machine count. Cook County, no difference. Berrien County, no difference. You can go through about 30 some odd counties, no differences. Cherokee County, what was your vote total difference between the three different counties? And what you did see when you did the hand recount, guess what? We had some issues in Floyd County, Fulton County, and also in Fayette County. And so that they realized their errors, and that got rectified. But their errors got shown when you do the hand recount. Why aren't they totaling up?
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for being with us
Brad.
tonight. I appreciate the acceptance of the invitation and your time.
Good to see y'all.
And we wish you the best
thank
of luck.
you so much.
Buzz, he doesn't do politics anymore. He does lobbying or public service, and so. But love to come out and just meet with people, talk to people, and good to see you again, Jason. Thank you.
Yeah.
It was good seeing you, Secretary Raffensperger. If you're ever up in DC, please do let me know. I'd love to take you out to lunch and hear more stories. So, thank you so much.
You, Brad.
And make sure you remember to stay on so we can get all your recording. So, guys, that was a really fascinating conversation, and I'm really glad we had him on. And I'm hoping our listeners will appreciate that one. And folks, immediately after this, I'm using the opportunity, patreon.com/peachpundit, become a subscriber on Patreon. There are all sorts of little things we give you in each tier. So please subscribe. 100% of the money we get goes right back into the podcast. This podcast actually costs us money to do. So
it does.
So, but again, that's patreon.com/peachpundit. But before we jump into
let's give our shout outs now. Let's do it now.
Oh, you do it now.
Since you already talked.
You do it now.
Yeah. Well, we've got Sam Thomas, John Vestal, Red Kudzu. Oh, man. I've lost the other two. Did we get any more?
Scott, come on, man.
Yeah.
You're the one who said, well, we got to do it. Let's do them now.
We'll do the other two before the end. We're teasing it out.
Oh, my. Guys, I am so sorry that Scott has failed all of you here. So, Sam Thomas.
Yes.
Benjamin Horst, Reed Powell, Red Kudzu, and John Vestal.
Yeah.
And
if you want to be anonymous like Red Kudzu, you can. We'll appreciate it.
And Scott, you actually owe one of our Patreons a T-shirt. So
what?
Yeah, because we have one in the actually we have two in the $10 tier. No, one in the $10 tier. One in the $10 tier. That is John Vestal. So you owe him a T-shirt.
Okay, well, we'll get working on that.
But that's after a couple.
Next
I
week,
think it's after a couple months.
It'll be a couple weeks.
Yeah,
it'll be a couple weeks. But John will get his T-shirt.
Yeah. So, but I wanted to use this opportunity to talk about partisan politics, or talk about party politics in general, because what a perfect way to lead into this discussion. One that I want to have. This is my contribution to the damn agenda this week, and that is some serious frustration with the Libertarian Party. Two of the three of us on this podcast have dabbled in Libertarian Party politics in the past. The other one,
I've repented of my sins.
Yes. Up until Saturday, I was a member of the Libertarian Party, and I was a member in the past too. I was a state party chairman for a while, and I had rejoined the Libertarian Party in the days immediately after January 6, 2021. And the reason I did so was after a 90-minute long conversation with my friend Justin Amash, during which I just basically was like, I'm looking for I'm pissed off, I'm angry, I'm looking for somewhere to channel my anger, and I'm choosing to get back involved in the Libertarian Party. Got elected to the state executive committee. They had a vacancy. Became friends with Ryan Graham. Still a friend with Ryan Graham. But recently they had a leadership change, and this is some internal dynamics inside the LP that a lot of people don't understand. But imagine. Republicans probably would understand it in this way. There has been a Trumpian style takeover of the Libertarian Party. You have a group of people, they call themselves the Mises Caucus, who have come inside the Libertarian Party. They're basically anti-woke, own the libs style politics that have come in and taken over the party. And some of the folks who are involved in this, when I say they are Confederate, like they're neo-Confederates, they're historical revisionists. Some of them are outright racist, and it's just it's constantly like shock value. It's very obvious they're trying to appeal to young white men. So when that happened a couple of weeks ago, I left the party. I consider myself a free agent. I am politically homeless. Not the first time, probably won't be the last time. Probably going to be the longest stretch of my life where I'm politically homeless, because I literally don't like any party right now. So I just wanted to get that off my chest. Ryan Graham, you're still a friend of mine. I still encourage people to vote for him who live in Georgia. There's a couple other Libertarian Party candidates on the ballot who I encourage people to vote for, but I'm not saying that because they're libertarians. I'm saying that because they're good people. But the Libertarian Party is dead to me. But so is the Republican Party and the Democratic Party.
So if a libertarian tree falls in a forest and there's no one there to hear it, does it still make a sound?
It's a whimper. It's a whimper. It's
division.
It's about division.
Am I being detained?
It's about a 1 to 4% whimper.
Well, that's the point I'm trying to make.
Yeah, no, I know.
Jason, you may be politically homeless, and this group that was irrelevant has become more irrelevant, I think is what you're saying, is what I'm hearing.
Those are your words, not mine. Well, because you can ask David Perdue if they're irrelevant.
Yeah.
He would say no.
Yeah.
But I digress.
Well, all that to say that what I have said all along, and since my journey out of the LP and into the Republican Party, that there's a lot I disagree with a lot of people within my party, but I'm never going to give up on it. You just heard Brad Raffensperger. Well, you asked him the question. You went through just this weekend.
Yeah.
Have you ever just thrown your hands up and given up?
Yeah.
And he said no, very succinctly, one word answer. Mm-hmm. And the reason why is because there's room for people who believe like you within the Republican Party. Yes, there is.
No, there's not.
Look, dude, if there's room for me, there's room for you.
I'm crazier than you, first of all. And like, I'm more like the anti-woke stuff just rubs me the wrong way. And that's like, that is the Republican
As
Party.
As a libertarian.
No, let me finish. Let me finish. The Republican Party platform right now is own the libs. It doesn't matter what. Yeah. It doesn't.
Well, there is no platform right now.
Well, if they were to have a platform, that would be what it is. Yeah, it's just own the libs. Education, own the libs. Foreign policy, own the libs. Criminal justice reform, own the libs. That's not a party.
Yeah,
it's a cult of personality, and you damn well know it. And I love you to death, Scott. I do, but you know it's what the party is right now.
I know that there are people who are in charge of my party that, like a David Shafer, that I am disappointed in. But I also know that if I abandon the party, it will never course correct. And so I'm committed until I die to making the Republican Party as best as it possibly can be. Even if you disagree with the woke stuff, as a libertarian, you must recognize that even culturally, forcing somebody to adopt an ideal or a set of philosophies is not a good way to go.
No, I don't
society.
disagree with you. No, and when and if, and some people may say it's an if, not a when. If the government ever tries to get in a position where it's forcing churches to perform same-sex marriages, I'll be one of the people who's standing alongside people who of faith to fight against it, because I don't think a church should be forced to do something that is clearly against what it believes. Romans chapter 1 makes that very clear. That said,
but it's pretty clear as a society that we've headed down that road.
But
and so
there's a
the
difference.
wokeism stuff may get on your nerves, but I think it is a reaction to what we are seeing in culture.
It might be a reaction to what we're seeing in culture. And look, we're dealing with some of this stuff in the criminal justice movement, where you have someone like Chasey Aboudin out in San Francisco who's taken criminal justice. They call it criminal justice reform. I call it not prosecuting people like you're supposed to. Because the left has a tendency to take things too far, and the right reacts and they push it in the other direction. There's nobody coming to the center. And that's the thing. Hold on. And that's
if we abandon the party to the people who won't move towards the center, you're going to get more extreme. So you have to stay involved. You have to get involved or stay involved.
Your party right now is dominated by people who are on the extreme.
No, sir. I reject that. Hold on. 1 second, Buzz. No, sir. Rejected wholesale, and I got data. 74% just voted for Brian Kemp.
No, it's
Put that in your pipe and smoke it.
No, and I'm talking about more nationally than anything else. But I also see Marjorie Taylor Greene. Scott, you got to stop cutting me off, man. I'm talking about Marjorie Taylor Greene winning 70% of the vote. I'm talking about Vernon Jones going to a runoff against a guy who's already arguably lost his damn mind, Mike Collins. And I'm talking about other races around the country where like Nancy Mace out in South Carolina is in trouble because she didn't kiss the ring. Mm-hmm. And I'm talking about other Republicans across the country who are facing electoral wipeouts because they dared either voted for January 6th, like I think Trent Kelly down in Mississippi, or maybe it wasn't Kelly. Maybe it was Palazzo. I don't remember which member from Mississippi it was who voted for the January 6th committee. And you have other ones who Peter Meyer in Michigan, who's facing a loss in a Republican primary because he voted for impeachment. Mm-hmm. What I'm saying is the Republican Party is not just pushing back on wokeism; it's illiberalism. The Republican Party is increasingly moving away from liberal ideas, and I'm talking about the good kind of liberal, the founding fathers kind of liberal, classical liberalism, the notions of the Age of Reason and the Enlightenment that basically birthed the American experiment. What we know in the Declaration of Independence, the ideas of Locke and others who had a hand, whether indirectly, in bringing this great experiment to light. And the illiberalism is where the Republican Party is trending. More so than the Democratic Party right now, where increasingly it's not just it's we don't like big tech companies, so we're going to break them up. Because for whatever reason, we're going to break them up. We're going to repeal Section 230 because they took Donald Trump off Twitter. Never mind. It's a private platform. It's vetoing money for. And I don't like the subsidies that the Tampa Bay Devil Rays were going to get. I'm against them too, but it's vetoing it not because the subsidies are bad themselves. It's vetoing it because they put out a message on guns you disagreed with.
I thought the segment was going after Disney. About Jason leaving the Libertarian Party. So now here's all the reasons why I'll never join the Republican Party.
Yes, here are the reasons why I prefer to remain in the political wilderness for the time being. And as if to prove my point, Marjorie Taylor Greene, she who must not be named, has an interest.
I don't get to cut you off, but I also don't get to respond. I got.
We can't leave this just yet.
No, go ahead, Scott.
No, Buzz, go first.
All right. Well, look,
Buzz.
look. it's concerning to me. You started off with the fact that these people who call themselves the Mises Caucus, which are really, they try to cloak themselves in that, but they have all these other views that are obscene and outside the mainstream. I just finished reading a great book I'd recommend to everybody from Matthew Continenti called The Right. It's looking at the 100-year war for conservatism. You see, what shocked me was you listen to this, the way he lays it all out, things like that you just mentioned, they've been present in various levels on the right for a long, long time, really going back. He takes it back to Calvin Coolidge and starts it there and all the different thoughts that have taken place in the Republican Party, really on the right generally. And so I think, the danger that the Republican Party faces right now, you intimated it, Jason. A group of nationalists and populists have taken. They're not conservatives. They're nationalists and populists, and that thinking has a lot more sway in the Republican Party right now than it's had in a long, long time, maybe ever, maybe since the days of Pat Buchanan. And that's a danger because we run the risk of becoming a minority party and driving people out. But anyway, that was the point I wanted to make. These things are not new. This Mises crowd is not a new crowd. They've been around. Maybe they're calling themselves that now when they called themselves something else in previous generations, but they're still around. And it's a danger for the Libertarian Party and the Republican Party. Anybody who considers himself generally a part of the center right has to watch out for these knuckleheads.
Yeah, on the Mises side, they're very similar to the sort of new right that we're seeing emerge in the conservative movement, who basically this illiberal. I wouldn't say they're that bad, but the new right, like Claremont Institute, things like that. That's what I'm talking about. But Scott, you may respond.
None of that gets fixed by me walking away. That's it. That's it. I could have been frustrated and thrown my hands in the air. I was in the room when I heard them cheering for Vernon Jones at last year's state convention. I was there, and I could have walked out of that moment. I could have said, you know what, I'm done with this. There's no way people are stupid enough to ignore Vernon Jones's decades of being a Democrat and the policies he stood for. They're not stupid enough to fall for it. I could have said that at that time and just thrown my hands up and walked away. But I'm not. I'm still engaged. I'm still involved. And I'm still passionate about writing the course of the party. I'm not going to disagree with all that stuff that you said. And on our next topic, I'm going to criticize the hell out of a sitting congressional.
Yeah, but that's nothing new for us.
Right. But these are the things you have to do to look. If you can't fight for your party, how can you fight for your country? How can you fight for your state or your community? How can you fight for your family? If you're not willing to fight for the direction your party should be heading, then how could you fight for anything else?
It's just all taxing.
Well, you know what? You got to do it. It's a duty. It's a responsibility, and it's not a suicide pact. But at a certain point, if my life was in danger, I would go. Or my family was in danger, but that's not the case. We're fighting on the soapboxes of America. We're debating each other. We're trying to wrestle with each other for control of this giant entity that is nebulous at best. You look at all the different factions of the Republican Party just inside Georgia, and trying to put a direction on that is nearly impossible. The best you can hope for is that the candidate is able to develop and project a message of hope in the policies that he is projecting that would draw people to them. Mm-hmm. And then the role of the party is to get that person elected. Yeah. And sometimes that means that we have to set our own personal things aside and support the candidate. Like I will be voting for Herschel Walker with one caveat. He's got to show up to the debates. Shows up to the debates, I'm voting for Herschel Walker. I have no idea what he stands for right now, but I know what Raphael Warnock stands for. And so as a party activist, I'm going to do everything I can to get our party back on. I can't do it from the outside. I have no influence if I throw my hands in the air and walk away in a hissy fit. None. All right. The only influence I have is through relationship, and you have to be in the room to have a relationship.
All right. I hate to do this, but we have to move on because I have angry roommates texting me wondering when we're going to be able to go for dinner. as I was saying, speaking of illiberalism, she who must not be named has an interesting intern, and this came up on the podcast. Can we change her name? I don't want to call her she who must not be named. Can we call her the QAnon Congresswoman instead? That's fine with me. Okay. So the QAnon Congresswoman. By the way, I'll tell you about this story offline. So anyway, she was several weeks ago during the primary debates. Milo Yiannopoulos was spotted hanging out backstage, and then
Atlanta file defending Milo.
Atlanta
the
Press Club
groomer.
debates. Yep.
Yeah, Atlanta Press Club debates. He defended Milo Yiannopoulos, who used to be a conservative commentator, far right conservative commentator at Breitbart, and he used to occasionally appear on Fox News and other conservative media. Has apparently been hired as an intern by Marjorie Taylor Greene, according to him on his Telegram channel or whatever the hell. He claims to be no longer gay. Because he was gay or is I don't know, but he did
so. Yeah,
flamboyantly so. He called Trump daddy, and he, this is a guy who once defended 13-year-olds having relationships with older men, and Marjorie Taylor Greene's defending it by saying that he is,
it was life affirming were his words.
Yeah, that he is a Christian, is no longer gay, has reformed himself, as it were. If one needs to be reformed, I think it's fine to be gay. It's not fine to groom young men, but whatever. This is weird, considering that this is the same Congresswoman who has made a big deal about grooming and she
QAnon.
dabbles in QAnon. That she is maybe she's been projecting a little too much. I don't know.
So I guess has
I'm embarrassed.
Yeah, it's embarrassing. I mean, look, I'm all for people turning their lives, making changes that they think are more positive in their life, and if that's what he's done, then good for him. But I just don't know what. If has he disavowed these statements that he's made in the past? I don't know. I don't follow his career well enough to know, but. I guess we should say he's unpaid. She's not paying him, so no taxpayer dollars are flowing into his pockets. But what does he bring to the table? Does he have particular expertise in domestic or foreign policy? Not that I'm aware of. Is he any expert in constituent services? Because Marjorie MTG suffers greatly from that aspect of her job too. So I don't know what. I don't know what the purpose of this is other than just to be provocative.
Yeah, I mean, you couldn't even really call him a journalist because he was a provocateur.
Yeah.
But the best thing he would have to offer is some sort of press or communications help because he doesn't know anything about policy issues as far as I know. Scott?
If you're in the QAnon movement and you really believe that Q is real, and the lady who has been trumpeting your cause the loudest in Congress hires a defender of pedophilia, a man who once said that 13-year-old boys having sex with grown men is life affirming. Those were his words. If you're part of that movement, the QAnon movement, how batshit crazy are you going right now? I mean, you were already guano level crazy, but now, I mean, they got to her. They got to her.
Yeah.
They turned her. They allowed her, whoever the ring of pedophilia traffickers are in D.C. got to Marjorie Taylor Greene. Oh, my God. And for those of you who are listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or one of the other platforms, SoundCloud, wherever, you can't see me rolling my eyes in sarcasm.
Maybe MTG's been spending some time up at Comet Pizza.
Yeah.
Maybe her and the guy that developed Dragon Con have been hanging out a little too much. I don't know, dude. Maybe she's wearing a furry suit when we don't know about it. Maybe there's something to.
Thanks a lot for that visual.
Maybe there's something to all those.
Come on, man.
Maybe there's something to all. Well, there's those articles about when she was doing CrossFit, so that's out there already. So I'm not tilling new ground here, gents. I'm not.
No, well,
but
well,
all I can say is I'm embarrassed.
Constituents don't seem to care.
Yet again,
so whatever, man.
As well, and maybe they don't know. I can't explain it. Incumbency advantages is a powerful drug, but every time I think the QAnon Congresswoman has found the bottom, she continues the descent every time.
Speaking about finding the bottom and then continuing the descent, David Shafer, the chairman of the Georgia Republican Party. So first of all, he is hosting a fundraiser for the Georgia Republican Party. Is it Foundation?
The Foundation.
Georgia Republican Foundation.
And the special guest is QAnon Congresswoman.
Yeah.
She who must not be named, whatever you want to call her. She is the special guest. That is Wednesday, June 29th. It's a breakfast.
Why not?
Whatever.
Embracing it, just going all in.
But Shafer, apparently Eric Erickson tweeted out today, and this comes from a story in the Atlanta Journal-Constitution about Shafer's impartiality during the Republican primary. And the article was by Greg Bluestein. The article was written on June 3rd, just basically suggesting that Shafer was not impartial as he was supposed to be during the Republican primaries. And I think we've alluded to that here on the podcast, that Shafer was indeed not. He was subtly impartial. Or not impartial. Well, I mean, I say subtly by not promoting Kemp's achievements during the legislative session. So
putting the Buckhead referendum on
showing up
on
at
GOP
Trump rallies.
Yeah, right. That's true. Yeah,
standing on stage next to Trump when Trump said he'd rather have Stacey Abrams than Brian Kemp.
Yep.
Fair enough.
That was subtle.
So Eric Erickson tweeted out the same day, the chairman of the Georgia Republican Party should resign. He probably won't. No state GOP elected official trusts him. He was openly ridiculed by state legislators at the Kemp event. The state party needs to purge generally and of the chairman specifically. Then he went on to tweet more specifically, we're going to see the statewide elected officials and state legislators operate a separate quasi-party apparatus because the state GOP is an inept shit show, more interested in humping Trump's leg than winning elections. He further continued, everyone has everyone has to believe the party chair recruited or was involved in recruitment of multiple candidates to existing incumbents, I think is what Eric meant. Yeah, against existing incumbents, including the governor and attorney general.
Fact check.
Eric
True.
left out a couple words there. Fact check. True. Let me ask you guys both: should David Shafer resign?
Yes, I think so.
I think if he had any honor, he would have already, because it was very clear where his agenda lied, and it wasn't with electing Brian Kemp or John King or Chris Carr. I mean, he did tweet congratulations to them individually the day after the election when he and his slate of candidates got their butts handed to them. But I've heard through the grapevine about him specifically trying to recruit candidates against John King. And I mean, there was absolutely no reason why the party chairman should have been engaged in that race at all.
Yeah.
And he's out there, look, he should resign, to answer your question. Will he? No, because David Shafer can't handle not being in the room. He should let somebody else take the reins. You're not going to find more than 5 Republicans in the entire state who are elected already that will trust him enough to let him coordinate with their campaign.
He's not going to be in the room.
I was in office,
right? Yeah,
he's
not going to be in the room because the Republicans, elected Republicans, are going to do what they need to do to get themselves elected. The RNC and all these other organizations will ignore him. The Georgia GOP will do nothing because nobody will give them money and nobody will work. No candidate will want to work with them because they won't know when you're going to turn on me.
Yeah,
right.
And now
it's not just legislature.
It's not just the state party chair. there were all kinds of, there were local, I'm not going to call people out here, but, by name, but there were plenty of local Republican officials who showed up at the quote unquote Trump bus tour that John Fredericks, that radio host from wherever he's from, organized with Debbie
Virginia.
Dooley. Yeah. There were plenty of them. You look at the pictures they had. There were people signing on behalf of various county parties. At least one here in the metro area hosted the bus tour. So yeah, it's where are they getting that idea? They're taking their lead from the state party chair, and they were involved in all sorts of races.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Right.
Well,
I was contacted by Bloomberg News this week by a reporter who's doing a story on Shafer, and I don't know if it's come out yet or not, but it's about that disconnect. My piece on the disconnect between the Republican Party activists and the voter has gotten attention, and she contacted me because of that piece that I'd written, asking me when I was going to have part 2, and I had to explain to her that since I've written it, dozens of people have come forward with stories that I can't decide which part is going to be part 2 because there's so many stories.
Yeah.
And the folks over at Georgia Paul, wrote a piece, our Peach Pundit's grandbaby over there at Georgia Paul, they wrote a piece about how Catoosa County is disconnected from the Republican voters and gave specific examples. And so as my interview with her, she asked me the same question. Well, do you think he'll resign? I said, no, I think he'll get reelected.
Yeah.
And because the party activists are not in touch with the desires of the actual Republican voters. And they see the actual Republican voters as the threat, right? And so they chase them out anytime they show up anywhere.
Well, it's not just Republican voters. It's independents. It's, this is the thing that's, I'm not going to sit here and predict the death of the Republican Party, but polling shows us that people are leaving the two major parties in droves, and they're calling themselves independents. Mm-hmm. Now you could say, well, they all have a bias one way or the other. Maybe that's true. I don't know, but they just don't want to tell anybody anymore because telling somebody you're Republican or Democrat is the basis of a lot of conflict.
Right.
But more and more voters are becoming independents. That pool of voters is becoming larger, and they're starting to tune out politics. Because it's just they're starting to tune out political tribalism because people, and that's ultimately, you want to go back to the previous discussion. I don't want to go back there, but the tribalism aspect of politics is what's so tiring and taxing. It's my tribe, team red team, yeah. Just go screw yourself. I'll have a hard pass, But I really do have to go to dinner soon, so I wanted to go email this. So. There's the January 6th committee tomorrow is having a public hearing, 8 p.m. in prime time, covering what's what revelations they're gonna talk about. I don't know, but one of the things that has been coming up is this alternate slate of electors that came out of some of these Republican states, or not Republican states, but controversial states, Georgia being one of them. I read this story a couple days, or yesterday, I think, or maybe this morning. But it certainly seems that a lot of Republicans, some Republicans, should say, didn't want anything to do with this, while others sort of jumped at the chance. Do you think? Let me ask you guys: do you think the folks who were part of this thought they were doing something that could potentially be investigated and determined to be illegal?
No, I don't. I know a couple of them, and I'll tell you what they've told me is that they were instructed by a legal team to meet in order to preserve any type of right in court. If the day that they're supposed to meet and the place that they're supposed to meet are written into law, and therefore they would have had to have met there at that time, and they were told by lawyers that we have a legal challenge. It's pending. We're in front of a judge. If you do not meet at this time and place as prescribed by law, it could be a technicality and it could get thrown out. And so you had people participate for that reason and that reason only, to preserve Trump's rights in the courtroom. So what was interesting is the secrecy that they wanted. They pointed to 2 state senators, Burt Jones, who's now the LG nominee, and to Brandon Beach, saying, if you go there, just tell them that you're going to meet one of these 2 senators. Well, completely unnecessary, because when you show up to the Capitol, nobody asks you why you're there. They just make sure that you don't have weapons on you, or you don't have, a nuclear bomb in your briefcase, and they let you through. It's like the easiest experience walking through security. There's no questioning. It's show your ID, go through a metal detector.
Right.
You're in the building. Nobody's asking you. They won't even tell you where to go unless you ask them. So
that's
how
true,
do I
Scott,
find room?
The press was also there because it was done at the same time as the official, the real votes were being electoral votes were being cast, and so the press knew about this within moments of them gathering in. I believe it was in room 216, as I recall, looking at the photos. They knew within minutes.
Yeah, it was 216.
Who it was and who was in there and what was going on. So
and Shafer claims he let the cameras in, and there were cameras in the room when they met. So I don't understand why the email, because the email did have aspects of, we're going to try to keep this a secret. Yeah. And it was unnecessary because there's nobody keeping tabs on you when you walk around the state capitol. It just doesn't happen. And you're free to move about the building. You can walk into the governor's office, into the lobby area without an appointment, sign the guest book, get some peanuts, get a Georgia flag, walk over across the hall, see Brad Raffensperger, grab a copy of the Constitution. I mean,
there's one thing I've learned in my time in Georgia politics is that whenever you go to the Capitol, if you hear a rumor, do not spread it, because it winds up being something entirely different. It's just like high school. The rumor starts, it winds up as being something entirely different by the time it's by the end of the day. So you're best to not spread rumors. There is no way you see this group of people walking into this room and you don't realize what's going on.
Well, and many of them
especially that group of people.
Yeah. And people would have known, oh, wait, those people are so-and-so, these people are, would have been Republican electors had Donald Trump won Georgia. So,
right.
I think for Fani Willis and the other people who are looking at prosecuting this, the members of the January 6th committee, their challenge is going to be to prove the intent. Right. Mm-hmm. And so they're trying to say, because this email included secrecy as part of it, that it was meant to be deceptive. Yeah. And I don't know that can be proven based upon that. I think there are other reasonable explanations.
Yeah.
For intent is very hard to prove.
Yeah.
Right. And so if somebody says there was pending litigation and we had a time and place we had to meet if we were going to do it, and this is why we did it, it's hard to disprove that as their motive. Yeah. And so you have to have criminal intent in order to prosecute. So I've always thought that the attention that they were putting on this was misplaced.
Yeah. Well, right. Yeah. I mean, I think, and it'll be interesting, back to the January 6th committee is going to be on in prime time. I mean, what is primetime TV anymore? I mean, is the nation just going to be sitting on the edge of their seat to see what? I doubt it. It's going to be, as Trump would say, low ratings. I just can't imagine that people really want to hear about this. So, whatever.
Yeah. No. I mean, and I don't know. This. I think Fani Willis, her investigation, if you're going to do something, focus on the people who don't focus on the electors, because they might have been unwittingly taken down. And like, there's one thing I've learned is there's a really great book. It's 3 felonies a day. The average American commits 3 felonies a day. That's the theory. Often, and they do so unwittingly, so, it's here it is 7:00, 7:15. We have probably committed 2 or 3 today already. I've committed like 10 already.
Challenge
today.
Accepted.
Yeah. My point is this. They probably didn't know. Right. And intent does matter.
If you're not an attorney and a group of attorneys stand up and say, this is why we need to do this. Right. You're going to say, okay.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Mens rea is a great thing. It's a great thing. But what I would say to Fani Willis and her staff is stay focused if you want to prosecute someone, stay focused on the people who are immediately trying to influence the election. That is Donald Trump, Mark Meadows, Cleta Mitchell, and anybody else who was involved with that.
Yeah.
And those are the three people we know of for a fact who were involved in trying to influence the gentleman we had on at the top of the podcast. Stay focused on them, because they're the ones. If there is,
I was telling a friend the other day, I think, Fannie Willis is in an interesting spot. I don't know her real well, or at all. I've never met her, but she's right there in Fulton County. She's got problems of her own in the fact that she's got the far left in the city of Atlanta and Fulton County screaming for justice, that Donald Trump be frog marched to the Fulton County jail and made to pay for all his crimes against humanity. She's got to try to keep those people happy. Well, what do? Well, you impanel a grand jury, feed them stuff.
Yeah,
that doesn't necessarily mean that there's going to be prosecution. There may be. I don't know. I mean, we'll the facts will lead wherever the facts lead. But you're right, Eric, Jason. She needs to focus on what this was all about, which was, did Donald Trump and his people attempt to illegally pressure Brad Raffensperger or anybody else who counts votes in Georgia to break the law?
Yeah. Last topic, speaking of weird things that may be illegal, maybe not be illegal. I don't think anybody really knows. A PAC supporting Republican Party Senate candidate Herschel Walker has bought free gas cards for people, just giving them out, no conditions. Apparently, their attorney says it's legal, they can do it. Other people are not so sure. Regardless, it certainly seems questionable, at least ethically questionable.
Well, it's sort of like fair fight action. It was fair fight, wasn't it? Or maybe it was an Abrams campaign paying off medical debt of a whole bunch of people?
Oh, yeah, that's right. I forgot about that. Yeah.
Well, that was, B. Wynn went nuts over this. She talked about how when they were trying to give water out to people waiting in line to vote, that a investigator with a gun on their hip came out and told them they weren't allowed to do that. And now Herschel's out giving away free gas. And it wasn't Herschel, right? It wasn't Herschel. It was a PAC.
And nobody's standing in line to vote. Still doesn't
make it right in my mind.
And nobody's standing in line to vote.
They weren't standing in line to vote. They were handing out. Right. They were handing out pro-Herschel flyers, brochures about Herschel and his candidacy. But it was very clear that, look, when you do things like this, that's vote buying.
Yeah.
Okay. It shouldn't happen. But like when B. Wynn flipped out, I tweeted back at her. I said, nice. Now do Stacey Abrams buying people's debts. And the silence was all I heard. Yeah. Usually when I engage with one of the Democrats who I've served with, I get some sort of snarky response. David Dreyer might respond. McLaurin definitely usually responds. These guys were nowhere to be found when I pointed out, hey, if you're going to be outraged by it, I have the moral high ground here, because I'm saying, that shouldn't be happening. You shouldn't be giving away gas, but the $4,000 they gave away in gas cards pales in comparison to the hundreds of thousands of dollars that Stacey Abrams gave to people.
It was what I saw it the other day. It was over $1 million, I believe.
And let's be honest here, gas prices are ridiculous.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm going to teach my dog to pull me around in a cart. Mind your business.
I heard somebody say that gas prices are so bad that Dolly Parton was seen riding in a car with Jolene.
Oh, my God.
I mean, you got to do what you got to do. These times are hard.
All right. With that dad joke, I'm calling it a podcast. Just want to thank our Patreons one more time. Sam Thomas, Benjamin Horst. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Reed Powell, Red Kudzu, John Vestal. Thank you so much for contributing. Make sure you check out patreon.com/peachpundit. You can contribute as well. And make sure you also check us out on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. And also, of course, peachpundit.com. Guys, it's good seeing you.
We're out next week.
And well, yeah, that's right. And we're out next week because these guys will be nowhere to be found, and I'll be at a Braves game. So, anyway, peace out. Have a good one.
Bye.
Later.
Later, guys.